They're both via. Oh, I think there's David Gressly. All right, Mr. Gressly, are you on?
And I'm here too, Farhan. Good afternoon or good morning to you.
Good morning. Good afternoon to you, I guess. I can see you. I knew that you were connected. Okay, we're just trying to wait. All right, we have both you and David Gressly. Oh, can we get them on the screen? Yeah. Yeah. I can see them, but you can't. Good for me, not as good for you. Hold on, we're going to get them on the screen in just 1 second. All right, great. Thank you. We're very pleased to have with us this morning to give us a little bit of good news for a change. The administrator of the UN Development Program, Achim Steiner, and the resident and humanitarian coordinator for Yemen, David Gressly. They're both speaking to you by VTC about the developments concerning the FSO Safer off the coast of Yemen. We'll first hear from Mr. Steiner. Mr. Steiner, over to you.
Thank you, Farhan. It's a day in which both David and I think, are both extremely relieved that we can finally join the Secretary General as he has done this morning and speak to the world about a major milestone. Years and months of preparation for the salvage operation of the FSO Safer lie behind us, many challenges, many hurdles. But as of this morning, we are very pleased to report that the pumps are on. The pipes have been laid between the FSO Safer and the Yemen, the replacement tanker, and the first gallons of oil have in fact been pumped off the Safer onto the Yemen. As many of you have realized over the last few months, this has been a highly complex operation in which the United Nations, represented by David Gressly as the resident humanitarian coordinator, has been leading the negotiations, first of all, amongst the parties in Yemen in order to bring about an agreement and a framework within which such a unique and unusual salvage operation could take place. As we know, sadly, Yemen is still a country that finds itself in the midst of a conflict more than 8 years already lie behind it, with many consequences for its people. But one threat that has been looming large over the people of Yemen, but also the Red Sea and all the countries in the region, is this 47-year-old rusting tanker. 1.13 million barrels of oil loaded onto it. And by the way, some a few weeks ago questioned whether there was actually in fact any oil on the vessel. And I can assure you, we have now with independent surveyors measured the amount of oil on the vessel. It is around 1.13 million barrels. And as we speak, the operation is now underway, involving a highly diverse set of skills and expertise. Smith, the salvage company that we retained, is now conducting the actual pumping operation, and David will speak to that in a moment since he is on the vessel right now. But we have also had support, first of all, from many experts across the world who have contributed to the planning of this operation. As many of you will have followed over the last few months, it has involved anything from obviously maritime oil spill experts, maritime lawyers, insurance brokers, ship brokers, right down to the technical experts who are now on board of the FSO Safer and the Yemen. For example, also a chemist, because we are monitoring constantly the level of inert gases in the tanks that have to be pumped in order to reduce the risk of explosion. There have been underwater surveys of the structural integrity of the FSO Safer. And so the details obviously can be looked up by many of you. As we speak to you today, we are very relieved at this moment that the operation of pumping the oil has finally begun. But let us also be clear, this is just another step in this highly complex operation that ultimately will lead to the emptying of the tanks, then the cleaning of the tanks, then the towing away and the sound and ecological and socially responsible scrapping of the FSO Safer, and the delivery of a calm buoy. All of these are part of this operation FSO Safer. Farhan, I think with that, if you allow me, I'll happily hand over to David.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Gressly, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Achim, for that background. As Achim has mentioned, I'm currently on board the Endeavour, which is on the bridge, in fact, which is overseeing the work for Smith. Right behind me, you can see the FSO Safer itself, and just beyond that is the Yemen, the formerly known as the Nautica, the vessel that is currently receiving oil to offload from the FSO Safer. I have to say, since arriving here on the 30th of May, the Endeavor, the Smith Salvage has done everything possible to stabilize the FSO Safer, the vessel right behind me, to make sure that the transfer will be as safe from an environmental point of view, as well as from a personnel point of view. We're working very closely with local authorities as well, who are providing support on the FSO Safer to the operation. There's a good coordination going on between those on the FSO Safer and the other vessels in the operation. So we're very pleased how that has progressed. As you know, there's over 1 million barrels of oil on board, so this is going to take some time to finish. We will know shortly how much we have actually moved today. They're actually taking the sounding readings as we speak to see what quantity was moved, but we do expect that this will take approximately 19 days to move the 1.1 million barrels off of the vessel. We started work. The actual pumping started at 10:45 this morning, just to give you a precise time, on one compartment, and then a second compartment was brought online a couple hours later. And this will now work 24/7 going forward to empty the vessel as quickly as is possible. However, an operation of this nature always has ongoing risk. I think a great deal of work, as Achim has described, with various experts and with the support of local authorities, have gone a long ways to ensure mitigating those risks. But we continue to monitor for potential problems as we go along. And I think we have a very good team spirit here to deal with that if there's any issues that come up. There'll be a very rapid response to that. We have put in place, as a part of that, a robust crisis management team based in Hodeidah, and assembled expertise and equipment required to respond to any incident that may happen. You may recall that the Sana authorities requested that the plan that we're implementing now, they asked that this be done under a UN umbrella. So we did that through the Memorandum of Understanding reached in March 5th of last year, and have been working towards this day ever since. We're working particularly closely with the Safer Technical Committee based in Sana'a, and they have been providing access, security, and technical support, and have been working to establish a solid cooperation and coordination system for this operation. I also have to acknowledge the very important support we've received from the government of Yemen, who, among other things, has made a $5 million contribution through the Global Environmental Facility, and have provided good political and technical support throughout the preparation of this operation. We have so far raised over approximately $121 million from 23 member states, but also the European Union, and private sector, and the general public. In addition, we've gotten some bridging funding from OCHA to actually make sure we could go ahead with this operation, and are working to find reimbursement for them as well. We have to acknowledge their role in this. The broad coalition working to prevent the catastrophe includes countless individuals and organizations that provided invaluable expertise and in-kind support. It includes environmental groups like Greenpeace, and in Yemen, Hom Akhdar, and includes private companies like the Faham Group that proposed the initiative that was the basis for the plan that we're implementing today. I think this also shows the breadth not only of the operation, but of the concern and the threat that this vessel presented. Of course, the entire UN system is engaged, and I'm sure you've seen the statement from the Secretary General, who has placed great importance on resolving this issue. As the Secretary General said, the United Nations has stepped up and assumed this risk to conduct a very delicate operation when no one else was in a position to do so. With the UN in the lead, the world has pulled together to avoid a nightmare that scenario that has been talked about for the last 8 years. The completion of the oil transfer will mean the worst case humanitarian, environmental, and economic catastrophe will have been avoided. But it's not the end of the operation. The next critical steps include the delivery and installment of a catenary anchor leg mooring, which is a buoy that's attached to the pipeline, to which the replacement vessel will be safely tethered. This should be in place by September, and we need to get that done in that time frame because the weather becomes more problematic after that period. I'm very, very thankful for all the support this project has received. And on a final note, I really want to congratulate the United Nations Development Program under the leadership of Achim for the outstanding work that they've done in confronting all of the technical challenges, the financial risks, and sheer work that was required to get us to this point. So I want to thank not only him, but all of his team for all of the support that we've received over the last months. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. I'll now turn over the floor for questions. Amelie.
Thanks a lot for the briefing. Amélie Bottelier from AFP News Agency. I have two questions. First, on the financing, can you just tell us how much money you still need to complete the financing of the whole operation? And on the oil itself, if I remember correctly, last time you talked to us, you said that the oil would be tested to to estimate if there have been the quality of it, if there have been some damage over the time, to assess how much it would be worth. And so if so, can you tell us what the quality and then what the shipment of the oil is worth and what will happen with it now, since you said you work closely with the Yemen authority? Is the oil going back to them, or is there some kind of sharing with the Houthis? Thank you very much.
Maybe Farhan, I can begin by asking, because the issue of finance obviously is weighing heavily on our minds, as many of you know, and you just pointed out again. We have benefited from the generosity of many countries. David already alluded to 23 member states of the United Nations, to whom we're extremely grateful, private companies that have come forward, foundations. But as of today, we are still short of around $20 to $21 million. It's a little bit a matter also that is connected to the recycling and the sale of the FSO Safer eventually. But it is a fairly desperate situation, because we have had to borrow from our humanitarian colleagues in OCHA arrange this bridging finance in order to keep the operation going. Otherwise, we would have had to suspend it, because UNDP has signed contracts to which we are obliged to make payments on certain deadlines. And we obviously are appealing again today, together, as the Secretary General did in his message this morning, that some others may step forward who so far perhaps have sat back and watched this operation, perhaps because they didn't believe it was feasible or that it could not be done. I think as of this morning, we have, as the United Nations, I think, shown the world that not only did we take this threat extremely seriously, we have also put in place all the arrangements, and the operation is now underway. And this is a moment where, again, I would appeal to anyone who is in a position, and I speak here also to the CEOs in the oil and gas industry, in the shipping industry. This is an incident that is no one's individual responsibility, but is now our collective duty and responsibility to solve. And in that spirit, I think the United Nations can only act when it has the support of the world to assist on this. And some have asked whether the sale of the oil, the eventual sale of the oil, could not cover these costs. And as David might explain in a moment, at this stage, an agreement could not be found on the actual sale of the oil. But the priority with everyone was to get this cargo off a 47-year-old rusting tanker that could break apart or could explode at any point. When that operation is concluded, there have been discussions with both sides, and the eventual sale of the oil is indeed on the horizon. But as you can imagine, in the very complex setting of Yemen right now, lack of trust and also, in a sense, doubts about how this would work, this will be a next step in which ultimately the sale of oil will take place. And just to clarify, we had some delays in order to be able to send samples of the oil to laboratories. That set of samples has now been sent, and we will expect a qualitative assessment also within the next few days. But in the meantime, we were able to conduct the actual measurement with an independent surveyor on the vessel. So this is currently the stage at which we are. But David, over to you.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I'll just simply echo what you just said. The samples have been taken. Were required in part for insurance purposes as well, to determine the quality of the oil in terms of valuing it for the insurance. But the oil is in pretty good shape. We'll get the real details when that's done. And the full amount of the oil that we had expected is here. The compartments storing the oil, in many cases, were still fully intact, with not a large amount of oxygen on the inside, actually surprisingly. So a few were not, but even there, the quality of the oil seems to be still pretty good. So from that point of view, this still has value. Secondly, as Achim mentioned, the primary purpose of what we're trying to do now is secure the oil so it doesn't spill into the Red Sea. A real threat. I mean, after having seen the FSO Safer itself close up, it's quite clear that it had may not have had every problem imagined, but it had many problems. So the one good thing about the Safer is that the hull itself is very much intact, which is helping facilitate a more rapid transfer of the oil. But all the other systems were broken down, and it was very much a question of just a little bit more time before this oil will have spilled into the Red Sea. So we have now bought a great deal of time to work out legal issues, the issues among the parties themselves on how to sail and what for. So we have time now to discuss that without an imminent threat of catastrophe. So we'll continue to work on that and encourage the parties to find a solution to eventually removing the oil, ideally for the benefit of the people of Yemen. That's what we all want to see, so that this threat not only is put aside, but the value here is put to good use for the people of Yemen. Thank you.
Thanks. Deshi?
Actually, Emily just asked one of my questions, and just want to know, is there any plan for UNDP and for the United Nations after the whole issue got settled? How are you going to deal with the Yemen? I mean the tanker, the new tanker, and can you tell us, since the starting of the transfer of the oil, how do you evaluate the situation on the Safer tanker, which you actually just answered a part of it, I believe. Thank you.
Well, if I may begin, I think the situation on the tanker is, as David described, one where the last few weeks were spent on trying to mitigate all the risks of what is a highly complex operation. Not only is it, at the best of times to have a ship-to-ship transfer not as straightforward as some imagine, to do so in a conflict zone, to do so on a tanker that for many years had not been inspected, all of these preparatory steps, in a sense, had to be put in place. And let me also tell you, one of the elements of this operation was also to work together with the authorities locally in Hodeidah to train local technicians in case of an oil spill, because also as a result of the mining on land of landmines, it is not clear how easily one could, in a sense, mount an operation from the beaches should there be an oil leak in the course of this operation, which is also one reason why, in the end, together with the insurance companies, we agreed that we would arrange for an aerial standby capacity that should, in the unlikely case, a spill or a leak occur, we have a three-tiered plan. And if it is a major one, we could also use aerial support capacity in order to use chemicals to contain the potential fallout from such an oil leak. All these are elements in the preparatory process. And I should mention here also, for instance, the insurance companies. As you can imagine, not many insurance companies are necessarily keen to become engaged here. Together with our insurance broker in London, Howden, months and months of work went into finding a series of insurance companies or underwriters who would be willing to actually sign up to these 9 insurance policies that we put in place. And so in that sense, the operation is now mitigating virtually all the major risks. And yet we all know that there is no 100% certainty, which is why these precautionary measures and contingency plans are also in place. And just to emphasize, we have an agreement within this operation that UNDP will continue to oversee the Yemen, as it is now called, with a Euronav crew until the end of this year. And when David said we, in a sense, bought ourselves some time, this is also a time window in which we are training SEPOC staff on the maintenance of the vessel, and at the same time, hopefully with a view to advancing the negotiations between both parties on maybe an agreement of how the sale of the oil could take place.
Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Just on the situation, just to complement what I said earlier and Achim has just mentioned, I had a chance to meet with the crew of the Smith that was rotating out of Djibouti when I flew into Djibouti to come in with the Nautica. And I asked them the very question. I said, after several weeks on board the Sapphire, what did you find? And they made it very clear to me that this vessel desperately needed to be offloaded of its oil. It was not something that could be repaired. It was not something that would last that long. It was in better shape after their stabilization efforts, which would have extended its life without a spill. But that's with their efforts that they did during the initial phase. So this was a very serious issue. As we've said in the past, it was never a question of if, it was only a question of when. Unfortunately, we got here at a good time, while the vessel is still intact enough to make a relatively a lower environmental risk transfer possible. So we're very thankful that we found that condition. As we are speaking, in fact, UNDP and people on my team as well are sitting down with authorities here to talk about the very future of this, particularly after the 6 months that Achim has just mentioned, including crewing, how they will be trained, but also maintenance and things of that issue. So we have a bit of time. We don't have a long time. In fact, that's why we're starting now. We're not waiting for another 3 or 4 months. We want to get this taken. We want to have a clear plan that people can buy into before the end of the year, obviously. So we're taking that part very seriously as well. Thank you.
Thanks. James?
James Bays from Al Jazeera. Gentlemen, I wanted to just sort of look slightly beyond the tanker. I mean, this has been a very long-running saga. It is a very specific and serious case, and I know you can't celebrate until all the oil is finally pumped off. But as a symbol for Yemen, the fact you got everyone to agree to this, what does it mean for the humanitarian situation in Yemen? What does it potentially mean for the political situation in Yemen going forwards?
Well, perhaps just a couple of comments, and then David, from the operational perspective on the ground. I mean, as you know, the UN family is heavily engaged in Yemen. First of all, it is one of the largest humanitarian disasters that have grown out of this conflict. And as we speak, one of the implications also of averting an oil spill is that the shipping routes, for example, into Hodeidah, which are a vital lifeline to bring in humanitarian supplies, would not be interrupted. Just to give you one more illustration of how interconnected this ship is with the fate of millions of people on land, never mind the hundreds of thousands who would lose their incomes through destroyed fisheries, and many neighboring countries also having catastrophic impacts on their economies. But for all of us who work in Yemen today, and UNDP is one of a number of UN agencies that works in many parts of Yemen today, we are desperately trying to help people survive in the midst of this terrible conflict. And obviously, when you speak to the larger geopolitical context, there have been signals over the last few months that are positive, in the sense that parties have started to engage with one another again, whether directly or, through neighboring countries. And, one wants to be hopeful that a successful conclusion of this operation would also at least add confidence on both sides that something in terms of next steps is not only desirable, needed, but also possible. But David, in terms of the practicalities, particularly on the humanitarian operation, over to you in Hodeida.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think first thing I would like to cite is the extreme popularity, favorable response we're seeing from the Yemen public on this. This for them is a very important milestone. They know the threat, and so the public is quite supportive of this initiative. And your question goes well beyond the super tanker itself and its immediate, the consequences of not acting. I'm not ready to say that this is going to help peace come to Yemen, but it is an example that peace, could be a stepping stone for greater dialogue between the parties that are in conflict as we speak. It shows that there can be an accommodation on very important issues. And I hope, and it's a hope, that it can lead to greater support for a peace process here in Yemen that the people of Yemen, after 8 years, really need. I witness, I've been almost everywhere in Yemen, and I can tell you the consequences of this war have been quite serious, and it will be time to bring it to an end. This can contribute. That will be a wonderful thing as well, and we certainly hope so. But that remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thanks. Murat?
Thank you. Could you give us some more details on how this operation being secured and how the Houthi contribute on that? And I think Mr. Gressly mentioned the risk surrounding this operation. Could you elaborate more? And does that include security threats?
David, do you want to go ahead?
Well, frankly speaking, we haven't seen direct security threats against the operation itself. The authorities in Sana'a have control of the Hodeida port area and the surrounding territory. So, and also we've worked with the coalition to deconflict the whole operation, and they've agreed they want to see this go successfully. So I think the primary security threats have been fully mitigated in this case. The primary issue, of course, is that this is a country still at war, civil war, but also within the region. And that causes a great deal of distrust and a lot of more scrutiny from a security point of view. So we have to be very careful in our work to be seen as totally neutral, impartial in our work, and in position to make sure that what we're doing is totally above board. Transparency is required. So it's really a question of building trust that we're here to do just what we're doing, trying to end the threat of this tanker. It's a very highly suspicious environment all over the country, and as you would expect in a war situation. So that's been probably one of the major challenges that we face. But direct threats, we really don't see that at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If not, I'd like to thank once again our guests, Achim Steiner, the administrator of the UN Development Program, and David Gressly, the resident and humanitarian coordinator for Yemen. Mr. Gressly, you win for having the best backdrop of all of our recent guests. Have a great day. Thanks.
Bye-bye, Farhan.
Bye. Take care. Bye.